Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one person or one starfish at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. That's how we get the word out about what we do. I'm excited for our guest today. I just met Nicolai. He's in Italy, which I like. So good pizza, cappuccinos. and I'm excited. He's big into personal development, has a potential academy. He'll get into that a little bit more in his story, but excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being on.
Great to be here, Angela. Really excited as well.
Awesome. Well, let's go into stuff we chatted about a little bit before. So you were like in a traditional kind of thing, and then we went entrepreneurial. So let's just go through what got you into, and you've also traveled a lot, lived in a few different countries. So tell us just a
Yeah.
little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it's definitely been very adventurous, you could say. I'm Danish-Chinese, born in Brazil. And with my dad's work, I was fortunate as a kid to move around quite a lot. So I got to experience Denmark, Portugal, Thailand, South Korea, France, which I personally loved. But it was also in some ways I was always following a quite conventional path. I was brought up with a mindset around do well in school and go to university, which of course there are a lot of benefits to. But that was also a little bit my worldview. So I remember joining university, business school, wanting to excel there, and then ultimately joining a management consultancy, McKinsey in Dubai, and then moving with them to New York. And I was with them for almost 10 years. So that was,
Wow.
let's say, a big chapter of my life up until ultimately deciding to leave McKinsey, which was for me at least a pivotal moment, and was hard at the time, I recall.
Yeah, I imagine. So when you decided to leave, tell us a little bit about, and you're also married, so you also have like responsibilities and stuff like that, obviously.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst that made you decide to, quit? Obviously, I'm guessing it was a pretty good job. Actually, it sounds like a good job, whatever that means.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst in having you leave that and then wanting to become an entrepreneur, which is obviously a little bit more proven?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, leaving my 9 to 5 at the age of, I think, well, maybe what was it, 34? So somewhat late. Hadn't actually really thought about being an entrepreneur before that. McKinsey was a fantastic place. I was there for, yeah, almost 10 years, and I was fortunate to work with some fantastic people. We learned a lot, did amazing projects. And after the first couple of years of doing many different types of projects, I essentially specialized within leadership development and culture change. So working with large organizations, working with leaders to help them become their best versions of themselves, to become more, let's say, conscious of themselves as a leader and how they show up in the organization. And with that came a lot of deep personal development tools and concepts that I was fortunate to learn from the best, and then also apply in practice. So I loved the time there.
Yeah.
But it was really kind of a creeping thing that I felt over the last couple of years. It wasn't a big bang moment in my life where everything changed. I just felt over time incongruent. And I remember the word congruent kept just being in my mind for
Interesting.
the last couple of years. That was my late 20s. And I didn't really want to recognize it at the time, but I felt like I wasn't living a life aligned to what I wanted to do.
Mm.
I was working too much for what I wanted in my life, and also I felt like I don't see myself as being a lifelong consultant. I feel like I want to do something which is different. I have lots of these visions and things I want to bring into the world. So that was a gradual process, and ultimately, I remember that there comes a time when the thought of staying where you are becomes more uncomfortable than the thought of leaving. And that's when I had a bit of a wake-up call. I remember speaking to a partner, trying to explain my situation, kind of beating around the bush. And she just said to me, point blank, so you want to leave the firm? And she said, you don't want to become partner. That was her, simple phrase. She meant it very neutrally.
Mm.
But that was the moment I realized, okay, I've been fighting so hard and working so hard to become partner, because in my mind, that was
Right, because
that
that's
was
your
the
stepping
thing you
stone.
do. Yeah. And then when she said that, it just made me actually realize, you know what, that's true. And if I'm being totally honest with myself, I
Mm.
don't. So that was a
Wow.
big moment there. And then after that, everything felt easier. Then the decision to leave, of course, just
Mm.
flowed naturally from that. And it didn't seem so difficult.
If anyone listening to this, like I think that is the biggest thing is making the decision to shift or to change. Because once you make it, things like your mind just can't rest. Because otherwise, it is all over the place. Like, should I leave? Should I not leave? Should I? Yeah, and you're
Exactly.
just all
Yeah.
over the place, and it's hard to like focus on something. So you decide to leave. You tell your wife, "Hey, we're going to become entrepreneurs." How did that conversation go? And once you decided, you gave your notice and you're like,
Yeah.
now I'm an entrepreneur. Did you do it short? Like, did you do part-time for a while entrepreneurship, or did you like cut it and then you're like an entrepreneur? How did you transition?
Yeah, I was a very reflective journey. I also don't subscribe unless you have the financial means to just do the big bang, quit cold turkey, and change
Right.
everything, because I do think that it has to be measured risks. So
Yeah.
for me, I had the vision of where I wanted to be, and I talk a lot about with my clients about where do you see your life in 3 to 5 years, and you can get there if you take a series of quite deliberate steps. So for me, it was very clear where I wanted to be in 3 to 5 years. It also was very clear that it wasn't going to happen overnight. So with my wife, we discussed things. There were many factors. It was COVID. We were living in New York, which made everything more
Yeah.
difficult, all the uncertainty. Her family's in Sweden, my family's in Denmark. So coming back to Europe for us from a personal level just seemed like the right thing to do, because of the uncertainty, and let's say it was not clear when we could travel and all that. So there were many factors, but essentially what I did was I left McKinsey. I got a job at a startup that was then bought out by Workday in Italy. Also had a great experience there. Worked there for a year and a half, and then from there decided to set up my own advisory business. Over time, build up my own clients, build up my own coaching clients, and then fast forward about 4 years now, I am where I am today. So it's been a series of steps. It's no big bang, but I would say every few months has been very much pushing towards that vision of where I wanted to go.
So obviously your wife supported your decision, which is the most important person. How about your beliefs? Because you said your parents were the ones that were like, go to school and kind of get the job. That was kind of their culture and their way of what they know. How did they like go through all this with you? I mean, switching jobs first of all, and then moving countries, and then then quitting and becoming a consultant. Like, how was that?
I'm very fortunate in many ways, and I've realized
Mm.
that the older I get, the more I realize it. And I took it a bit for granted that growing up, I was brought up with a family, my parents, who in a way said you can become anything you want to become, but you also need to work for it. So I was brought up with a mindset around the importance of hard work, the
Mm.
importance of education, but also very much with the freedom of just not being hinged on what I could or couldn't do. For many years as a teenager, or even as a child up until the teenage years, I wanted to be a professional soccer player. So that was really like all consuming, because I would be training at least once a day, 7 times a week. And I really went for it. At 18, when I decided not to take that path, it was everything was kind of shattered and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But on the other hand, I also felt like I could actually become anything I wanted to become. I was thinking about a politician, about business, about NGOs. So I was very much exploring. And
Mm.
I'm very grateful that my parents encouraged that, always with the
Mhm.
mindset that, okay, whatever you decide to do, then put your full energy behind it and give it a shot. Don't do it half.
That's really cool. And I feel my parents are very supportive too. So they didn't understand anything I did, but they supported it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you kind of had the same thing. And then you got heavily, like we talked a little bit before. I mean, you wrote 3 books, which is, I mean, that's a big deal. I've thought of writing a book, but thinking and doing are two different things.
Yeah.
Um, how was that experience just overall? I mean, there are culture and leadership and some. Also, what's the third one again?
Yeah, it's like you said, thinking and doing is different. It's also, there's a saying that buying books and reading books are two entirely different hobbies, which I subscribe to. I definitely buy more than I read, but of course, it's a pleasure to walk around a bookstore. I mean, the writing of the books were, first of all, they're labors of love. So it takes, one of them took 5 years, all of them took around 3 to 5 years. And I never actually set out to become a published author as a starting point. It was much more, I had a question that I felt wasn't being answered on the market with the current literature. So, for example, the first book is around leadership at scale. And there's a lot of books to help develop individual leaders or teams of leaders. But I felt like, we work with large companies. This is when I was with McKinsey. We actually would like to develop or let's say change leadership across hundreds, thousands, or sometimes tens of thousands of leaders. And
Right.
how do you do that? So that was the question there. And we researched it and then ultimately, of course, wrote the book. Same with the second book, that was around, it's called Return on Ambition. And there, the question I grappled with was, I am very ambitious. I've been ambitious my whole life. and I often struggle with my ambition. I don't feel fulfilled
Mm-hmm.
many times. And then interestingly, many people in my environment
I was
actually
gonna say
feel
that's
the
so common.
same. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really a bit, this was, I started also let's say mid to late 20s when I had those questions. I was a bit perplexed, like what's going on? Ambition is meant to be a good thing if you have this drive. So that led me on a journey to explore ambition with my co-author, Nicolai Chen. And same with the last book, briefly, From Altus to Mars. It's about the future of work and how to thrive in it. Also had the question, like all these changes are coming, what's actually happening? How do you thrive? How do organizations transform to keep up with the times? So through that research, did the work, and then the book was a bit the end product of the doing after many years.
I'm really curious on the ambition. What did you figure out? What have you, yeah, what did you figure out coming out of that? Where are you at? Because that is something that I know I'm very ambitious, and sometimes, yeah, fulfillment is not necessarily there. So it's a really good point. So just curious what you came up with.
Yeah, ambition, it's a concept that I think is misunderstood. Some people actually see it as a negative thing. People see it as a positive thing. I think there are different ambitions of
Mm,
it. I think the main headline message is that ambition is definitely a strength, but can also get in the way and actually trip you up. And then we explore that
mm,
theme. What does it actually mean to be ambitious? How do you define your ambition?
mm,
And how do you define the outcomes? Or how do you measure the outcomes of your ambition? So you
mhm,
understand, in a way, how am I doing? You can take a bit stock of your life. We help people, or the book helps people reflect across three dimensions: my level of well-being, growth, and achievement. And in a way, thinking very critically about these three things, and there are a lot of sub-dimensions as well, because sometimes we can be a bit, as ambitious people, a bit too focused, especially on the achievement dimension. And what you often see is people who are achieving things and on the surface looking very successful, they're actually inside feeling very unfulfilled. Conversely, you also see if there's a lack of growth, you see people achieving great things, but at some point they either stagnate or become bored, or they feel like they're getting like a midlife or quarter life crisis, which I feel like more and more people are having earlier and earlier. And then finally, I would say ambition does a lot of things that get in the way, which are frenemies, friends and enemies of ambition. Things like desire, things like competitiveness, things like independence, things like perseverance. You could say amazing capabilities to have, but if they're overplayed, then they actually get in the way. So too much perseverance can lead to burnout. Too much desire, you never feel fulfilled. And being aware of that, if you have these tendencies, awareness brings power. Being aware of that is a big first step, and then trying to understand, okay, where is this coming from, and how can I actually work with it instead of having it work against me?
mm. Yeah, what's the word? Yeah, keeping things in, not too much of anything. For the word is. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
too much of a good thing is
Too much
too
of a
much of
good
anything
thing.
is yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And then so then you went into consulting, and then from there now you're opening an academy, and you're really into personal development. Tell us a little bit about your academy, what you see as your future, what your 5-year goal is. Yeah, and where the personal development. I'm also curious as you go through this. When did you start into personal development,
Mm,
and when did it become such a passion?
mm. I mean, personal development, for whatever reason, I was hooked on from quite a young age. I remember reading Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People at, I think, age 18, around that time,
Wow.
and was just hooked on it. And the book, of course, is it's about a lot more than effectivity. Or about effectiveness. It's a lot more than that. It's also about just being really aware about who you are and being the best version of yourself. And from there, I just started reading tons of books. And then through my work, was fortunate to work with some really great people, did a lot of retreats. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to do more of it. So that's been a 20-year journey now, 38 years old. And then as a profession, been coaching a lot of people for many years on an individual basis, done some facilitation, some teamwork as well, but really not in a very scalable format. And I've always had this vision that there needs to be an offering which can give amazing tools and concepts and transformations, but in a scalable way, which will mean digital first. And that's why I launched Potential Academy, actually very, very recently launched. But the whole idea there is to offer some of these tools and programs to people at scale, and over time build something which is much bigger, and of course goes way, way beyond myself. I mean, one more thing to add, the bigger vision is, one of those things that's so big it's kind of scary to talk about. But I also
Okay.
feel like a lot of education today, education and universities are meant to prepare people for the job market, you could say, but also for life. And I think, first of all, many universities aren't fully preparing people for the crazy changing future of work that we're seeing. I mean, it's moving so fast. So, should you really take 2 years off? And, there are benefits to doing that, but after 2 years, the stuff you learned in the first semester is probably less relevant. So there's something around going away from a 2 year education to having much shorter continuous learning, literally your whole life, and not stopping when you're in your mid 20s. I think there's also something around a lot of universities in general, or education in general focuses on professional skills and how to get a good how to get a job. I think what's missing is the whole human side. There's so much more to life that's not just about your professional capabilities. It's about being human. It's about empathy. It's about understanding who you are, your values, purpose, meaning in life. All these things I feel I didn't learn adequately growing up in the formal education. I had to learn it myself. And therefore, I think there is a huge space to give people these tools at an earlier age.
So I'm going to be, and I'm actually, I was homeschooled, so there's where I'm at. But I'll be the person on here that's listening. That's like, are you then anti-university?
Absolutely not. No, no.
I'll
I
be
mean,
the devil advocate here. I know you're
you
not,
can absolutely
but
play the
explain
devil's
a little bit.
advocate.
Yeah.
I think that you just need to be aware of what the pros and cons are of each type of education. I love my university years. I did them when I was young. I met so many amazing people, and I think that's definitely a reason you do it. You get into this environment where you're stretched, you're growing, you're there just to learn. You have 2 years of learning or even more without having a job in many cases. So that's a real privilege. I think, however, that life or learning doesn't stop when you graduate university. And I think that's a bit the lack, I think. And of course, you have some people who choose not to go to university. For me, it's really about doing something your whole life. Everyone should be on a personal development journey 24/7. Sometimes you lean in, sometimes you take a bit of a breather, but at any age, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you should be learning and stretching your mind. That's where I think the continuous learning in practice comes in.
So what's one way? I mean, you started at 18. Someone gave you that book somehow. What do you think is like if someone listening to this, they have kids, what do you give for an idea to get them into personal development? Or someone listening to this, and obviously if they're listening to this, there's some to personal development, they wouldn't listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
How would you encourage them to continue? Or like, yeah, what kind of journey would you take them on? And like I said, for kids, how would you to get them started? What are some ideas you thought of as far as, because I agree with you, personal development's everything, to keep people in that journey and to encourage people to get into the journey?
Hmm. I mean, personal development for me, it's like, for lack of better words, it's a bit like training. If you want to get better at tennis or any other facet of life, you need to put in the work, right? Have a structured environment, probably learn from someone who's better than you or someone who's a teacher or a trainer or a coach. And personal development's a bit the same. I think it doesn't just happen. I mean, you have life experiences and life moments where you pick up things along the way, of course. But I also think if you really want to grow as a person, you need to be quite deliberate about it. And that actually means thinking about what it is specifically that you want to work on at a moment in time, and then
Mm-hmm.
making either a curriculum or getting a coach or taking courses, in the same way like you would if you wanted to improve your tennis game. So it doesn't just happen. It needs to be quite deliberate. And I think for children, it's the same mindset that there are multiple areas of life. There's an intellectual area, but there's also an emotional area of life. There's a spiritual area of life. There's a physical area of life. How do you think about physical fitness and health? So helping people just broaden their understanding of things on how you can grow. And I think, well, for any age really, the community aspect is so important because, of course, it's more fun if you're doing it with other people and you feel part of a group, something bigger than yourself.
So where would someone find a group like that? Is that a little bit what you do? Um, or what do you suggest?
I've seen a lot of things crop up. There's the formal institution, let's say, for example, university. So there's always the conventional path. I think it's worth talking to people to understand the different paths available because the communities could be anywhere. I mean, entrepreneurship can also be a path in itself, and the communities can be anything from accelerators to investors and so forth. So that's also a form of development. I think on the personal development space, my experience is that there's lots of offerings, especially online, and there it's really about finding what vibes with you or what you vibe with. So reading up on, all the free content out there, whether it's YouTube or articles, each coach, each academy has a little bit their own take on both life and personal development. And at least for me, there's some that I really vibe with, and there's some that I don't, for various reasons. So finding a little bit that, what's your flavor and where's the chemistry. And then I would say try things out. I also don't think it's a commitment for life. And personal development, like any skill, it's not about the learning and then learning more and then learning more. It's also about the application. I think sometimes I've been there where I felt like I want to, for example, learn about emotions and empathy and get more in touch with that side of myself, buying 3 books and thinking that's going to solve it. Like that's not how it works. You read one book and then you try it in practice, and then you probably mess up a few times, and then you reflect on it, and then you keep going. So there's definitely an action part in this as well.
And what is Potential Academy? What's your goal with it? How does it work? Tell me a little bit about it.
Potential Academy, the vision really is a world where people are much more conscious of themselves and living their best life and essentially living up to their full potential. Um, So what we offer right now, there are 2 courses. As mentioned, it's quite recently launched, but there's one course around, it's called Personal Pathfinder. It's online courses, group coaching with myself. So it's a mix of online, but also live facilitated coaching. And Personal Pathfinder is really about helping you understand who you are, looking inside, through that understanding what's the path that is at least your next steps in life, and then taking action towards that. So that's more about getting unstuck or developing the self-awareness on what you would like to do with your life.
Oh,
The second program is called Sustainable Peak Performance. That's more for people who are, happy in their current context, but really want to understand how can I perform at my best day in, day out in a sustainable way.
cool. Oh, yeah. People that are not sure what they're going, and the people that are going somewhere will want to go there faster.
Exactly.
That's always a good thing. That's awesome. Well, in wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions, and then anything we didn't touch on that you just want to make sure that we get out to our listeners. Um, First and final question is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
I would say experiment, not getting stressed up about looking for your purpose, because that often can actually
Mm,
become stressful in itself. I would say think about what excites you. Keep it simple. Think about what makes you excited. What are you excited to try? And think another way to look at it, what gives you meaning? Or what do you find meaningful? And then try it out. See how it goes. So keep it simple and do it for a few months and see how it goes.
I like that. Second question. What's your favorite quote and why?
Huh.
I
Well, what
imagine there's
came
a
to
lot.
mind is I have many quotes. I think the one that just came to mind is I would say a guru, Michael Rennie. I worked with him for many years, really just conscious and developed as a human being. I asked him this question, what's your favorite quote or life lesson? And he said to me, the favorite one is what is, and what is not is not. Right? And it's so simple, but for me at least, there's many manifestations of it, but for at least for one of them is that there's all these things that we have in our minds ruminate, they create all kinds of stories. I think if we can cut through that and in a way elevate our perspective above it and ask ourselves what is and what is not, your mind stops playing tricks on you, and you can see reality the way it is and not the way, your mind is telling you it is.
I like that. And third and final question is, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
Courage.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that's a good one. All right, you run into someone in the coffee shop, and they listen to this, and they're like, they're getting brave, they're doing their own thing, checking things out, personal development, all the things we just talked about. What's something we didn't talk about you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
What came to mind is that personal development is, of course, so critical and important, but it's not always fun, or put the other way, it's actually very uncomfortable
Mm,
and is not meant to always be comfortable. You're meant to be stretched. You're meant to be challenging your worldviews, your beliefs. You're meant to be outside of your comfort zone. And all the research shows when people are moving between different stages of development, it's actually extremely uncomfortable because a part of you is still seeing the world in your old worldview. When I was leaving McKinsey, part of me wanted to be partner, But another part of you is not seeing things that way because they're seeing things from a higher perspective or seeing things in a way that's more aligned to who you are. So there is a bit of an internal conflict there. And the essentially persevering through that and keep going is what I would say. So even if personal development feels difficult, you'll come out on the other side and you'll just feel so much better and you'll look back and say, okay, that actually was totally worth the journey.
I love that. That's awesome. Guys, all of Nicolai's information will be in the show notes, his academy, all the things. Definitely reach out to him if you have any questions on anything. You can tell he's very approachable and happy to communicate. Let's go out there. Let's share this. Let's help one person. If we can help one person or change one life or one starfish, we'll be able to help change the world. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.